I always thought nothing could surprise me after 73 years on this earth. That was, until the day of my grandson's wedding, a day meant for joy, laughter, and the promise of a new family chapter. But what unfolded at the ceremony in Maple Grove, Indiana, would forever change the way I saw love, loyalty, and the lengths some people would go for a little extra square footage. It started that Saturday afternoon, sun pouring through the church's stained glass windows, the kind of light that makes everyone look a little more hopeful than they actually are. My grandson, Ben, was beaming beside his bride, Vanessa Carter. A beauty from the next county over, she'd won Ben's heart in what felt like the blink of an eye, 3 months, maybe less. But that's how the young ones do it these days, quick and all in. I remember warning Ben. Love is patient, son. The right person is worth waiting for. But when did young men ever listen to their grandfathers? Still, I wanted to trust his choice, to believe in his happiness. I even let myself get swept up in the music, the clapping, and the swirl of white lace as Vanessa tossed her bouquet. There was only one moment, during the reception in the country club's garden, when a shadow crossed my mind, Vanessa's eyes, sharp, searching, always landing on things she hadn't earned. My grandfather's watch, my late wife's porcelain vase, even the set of house keys Ben still carried from my place on Sycamore Lane. It wasn't long before Vanessa found her way over to me. She was dazzling, I'll give her that. Hair perfect, smile shining, but there was something in her voice that was colder than the spring breeze. Grandpa Joe, she said, her hands slipping onto my arm like she'd done it 1,000 times. Ben and I have been talking. That big old house of yours. It's perfect for a young couple starting out. You wouldn't mind moving somewhere cozier, would you? It's the sensible thing. I nearly choked on my lemonade. Excuse me? She didn't even blink. You have more space than you need. A young family deserves a real home. I mean, Ben's parents even said. I cut her off, my patience thinning. That house is my home. It's the only thing I have left of my Mary. I'm not signing it over to anyone. Her face turned red, anger boiling up faster than I thought possible. She leaned in, her words hissing out. You're just being selfish, Joe. Think about what's best for Ben. For us. I'll admit my hands were shaking. But not from fear. From rage. I looked her dead in the eye and said, You'll have to take it over my dead body. She snapped. And right there, in the middle of the wedding reception, my new granddaughter-in-law slapped me across the face. The crack echoed, slicing through laughter and music, stopping the entire party cold. 50 guests turned, and I could see Ben's face strain of color. I saw my family's future, fractured, uncertain. But I'd lived too long to let pride or pain keep me quiet. I reached for my cell phone, dialed a number I never thought I'd need. In that moment, I decided, if Vanessa thought she could bully her way into my home, she was in for the fight of her life. The call connected. I spoke quietly, just loud enough for Vanessa to hear. It's time. Do it now. She paled, her bravado cracking for the first time. Around us, whispers spread like wildfire, and Ben came rushing over, confusion and embarrassment painted across his face. Grandpa, what's going on? Why did Vanessa? Before I could answer, 2 men in dark suits arrived at the garden gate. Heads turned. The atmosphere shifted from celebration to a storm gathering on the horizon. And so, the reckoning began. You could have heard a pin drop as those 2 men, tall, broad-shouldered, looking like they belonged in a courtroom, not a garden party, walked through the wrought iron gates of Maple Grove Country Club. Even the band stopped playing, and for a split second, the only sound was the wind rattling through the old oak trees. Vanessa shrank back, her face losing all its color. For the first time, her confidence evaporated. She glanced around, probably looking for Ben or her parents, but everyone was frozen, waiting for the next move. Ben finally reached me, confusion written across his face. Grandpa Joe, what's happening? Why are there? Who are these men? I met his gaze, steady and calm. Ben, sometimes the truth needs a little help showing up on time. The taller man, a guy named Mr. Lawson, a private investigator I'd quietly hired 3 weeks earlier, nodded respectfully at me before turning to Vanessa. Miss Carter, he said, holding a folder in one hand. We need to have a word. Right now. Vanessa tried to muster her old fire. What's this about? This is my wedding day. Mr. Lawson's partner, a graying man named Green, stepped up. Not just your wedding, Miss Carter. Looks like you've been planning a few things behind the scenes. He held up a file thick with papers and photos. Ben's eyes darted between us, hurt and panic fighting for control. Grandpa, what is this? I put a hand on his shoulder, voice as gentle as I could manage. Ben, I didn't want to believe it. But I had to protect you, even if it meant ruining today. Green laid out the evidence on a nearby table, turning pages so the nearest guests could see. Pictures of Vanessa, sometimes with Ben, sometimes with a different man entirely. Letters. Receipts. Even text messages I'd hoped were just my own nightmares. All of it, proof of lies, secrets, and a plan to take more than just my house. Vanessa's parents, the Carters, pushed through the crowd, her mother's face a mix of horror and rage, her father looking like he'd rather be anywhere but here. This is a mistake, Mrs. Carter protested. Who are you people to ruin our daughter's wedding? Lawson spoke quietly. We're just here to make sure the truth comes out. It's what Mr. Dawson, he nodded to me, hired us for. Ben's face went pale as he flipped through the photos. Vanessa, what is all this? Who is this man? Why are there messages about money, my grandfather's house? Vanessa's mask finally cracked. She tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. They're lying, Ben! Your grandpa is just trying to keep us apart. He hates me. He never wanted us to be together. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Neighbors I'd known for 40 years whispered, old friends shook their heads. Vanessa's father put a hand on her arm, but she jerked away, eyes wild, her wedding veil askew. I kept my voice steady, even as my heart threatened to pound through my chest. This isn't about hating you, Vanessa. It's about loving my grandson enough to make sure he knows the truth before he signs his life away. She lunged at the table, trying to snatch the photos, but Lawson stopped her, calm and firm. Don't. We have copies. And that's when the dominoes really began to fall. Paul, Ben's best friend since childhood, stepped forward, holding his phone high. I got a message from Vanessa last night, asking me to help her move some of your things out of the house, Grandpa Joe. Before the honeymoon. She said you already agreed? But you didn't, did you? I shook my head. No, son. I most certainly did not. Ben stood silent, tears brimming in his eyes. Vanessa, why? Why would you do this on our wedding day? She didn't answer. Her face twisted, not in sadness, but in fury at being exposed. Lawson addressed the crowd, his voice even and professional. I think that's enough for today. Mr. Dawson, is there anything else you'd like to say? I looked at my grandson, my voice low but carrying through the hush. Ben, I love you. I just couldn't stand by and watch you lose everything, your money, your home, your heart, to someone who never really cared about you. For a long moment, nobody moved. The wedding was over, and the truth, at last, had walked through the door. For a few minutes, nobody at Maple Grove moved. It was as if time had frozen in the garden, each guest caught in their own private struggle, embarrassment, curiosity, even relief for some who'd always felt something was off about Vanessa. The wind rustled the tent flaps, and the smell of roses mixed with something heavier, the raw sting of betrayal. Ben just stood there, staring at the stack of photos, the evidence that his dream had been built on shifting sand. My heart ached for him. No matter how old your children or grandchildren get, you always want to shield them from the world's ugliness. But this time, I'd been the one to pull back the curtain, to reveal just how dark the shadows could get. Vanessa, still in her wedding dress, looked around for an escape, but found none. Some part of me pitied her, standing there, makeup smeared, veil drooping, the center of every conversation for all the wrong reasons. But another part, the older, wiser part, knew that sometimes life gives you exactly what you've earned. Ben's best man, Paul, put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Let's go inside, buddy. Let's get some air." Ben nodded, still shell-shocked, but let himself be guided into the clubhouse. The crowd started to break apart, quietly at first, then in clusters. A few guests tried to comfort Vanessa's parents, but their words were little help. The Carters had believed their daughter was about to step into a storybook future. Now they stared at the grass, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I slipped away toward the clubhouse too, wanting to give Ben a moment, but knowing he'd need me soon. Inside, he sat at the bar, head in his hands. Paul hovered nearby, quiet and steady. I eased onto the stool next to Ben and waited. After a minute, he looked up at me, eyes red but determined. "Grandpa, you didn't have to do all this. You could have just told me what you found." I shook my head gently. "Ben, you wouldn't have believed me. Sometimes love makes us deaf and blind at the same time." He tried to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. "How could I be so stupid? How could I not see it? Ben, don't blame yourself. She fooled a lot of people, not just you." I squeezed his shoulder, strong and steady. "But you're not stupid. You're just human." Paul slid a glass of water toward him. "You'll get through this, man. Better to find out now than after she got the house and everything else you worked for." Ben managed a weak smile. "That's what you always say, Grandpa. Better a hard truth than a sweet lie. Guess I finally learned that lesson." Outside, I could see Vanessa in the garden, surrounded by a shrinking circle of friends. She dropped the bride act entirely. No more sweet smiles, just cold calculation as she tried to salvage what she could. I watched as she cornered one of the private investigators, voice low and fierce, but there was no more hiding. The evidence was out. The charade was over. My phone buzzed. An old friend from the neighborhood, Mrs. Jenkins, who'd come to the wedding with her husband. Her text read, "Joe, you did the right thing. Ben's lucky to have you." I swallowed a lump in my throat. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good. Sometimes it just feels necessary. A little later, as the sky grew golden with late afternoon sun, Ben stood up. He turned to me, voice clearer than it had been all day. "Grandpa, I want to go home. Not your home, my own place. I need to be alone for a while, just to think." I nodded. "Of course, Ben. But remember, you're not alone. Not ever. Family doesn't disappear when things get rough. That's when we show up." He hugged me, really hugged me, the way he hadn't since he was a little boy. Then he headed out the side door with Paul at his side, the two of them disappearing into the gentle spring dusk. Back in the garden, the party had broken up. The band packed up their instruments, the catering crew loaded their trays, and the guests, well, they'd be talking about this day for years. Vanessa vanished into a waiting car with her mother. The Carters didn't look back. I walked home that night beneath the early stars, feeling the weight of the day press against my bones. I had protected my grandson, but I'd also shattered his world. That's the strange duty of family, to do what must be done, even when it hurts. Especially then. As I climbed the steps to my old house on Sycamore Lane, I paused at the door, looked up at the stars, and whispered, "Mary, I hope I did right by our boy." I thought I felt a gentle warmth in the night breeze, as if she was saying, "Yes, Joe. He'll be all right." But the story wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The next morning in Maple Grove, I woke up to find my phone buzzing nonstop. Texts, voicemails, even a couple of emails. News travels fast in a small town, and a scandal travels even faster. By breakfast, everyone from my barber to the post office clerk seemed to know about the wedding that wasn't. I poured myself a strong cup of coffee and sat at my old kitchen table, sunlight streaming across the faded linoleum. I thought about all the times Mary and I had sat here, planning birthday parties, talking over bills, sharing our dreams for Ben's future. Never did I imagine that a day would come when I'd have to stand between my grandson and a heartbreak so deep it could have ruined him. A message came in from Pastor Williams. "Joe, prayers for you and Ben. If you need anything, call me." I appreciated the kindness, but what I really needed was time. Time for Ben to lick his wounds, time for the rest of us to catch our breath. By noon, I couldn't avoid town forever. I drove into Main Street for groceries, head held high. Most folks greeted me with respect, a nod, a gentle pat on the back. Some offered awkward condolences, while others, those who loved a good bit of gossip, just watched, waiting to see if I'd say anything more. I didn't. Some stories are better left to fade on their own. Outside the hardware store, I bumped into Sam Harris, one of Ben's old teachers. "Joe," he said, "heard about what happened. Ben's a good kid. He'll bounce back." I nodded, grateful for the simplicity of Sam's words. No blame, no shame, just quiet faith in my grandson's strength. That evening, Ben called. His voice was steadier, but tired. "Grandpa, I've been thinking a lot. I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering how I missed the signs." I let him talk. Sometimes that's all a man needs, to let the pain out, piece by piece. He asked me questions about the past, about how I knew Mary was the one, about whether love ever really lasts. I told him the truth, plain and simple. Love lasts, Ben, but only when it's built on honesty. Trust your gut next time. If something feels wrong, it usually is. Ben didn't cry, but I could hear the relief in his voice when he finally said, "Thanks, Grandpa. For everything. I'll get through this, I promise." And I believed him. Days turned into a week. The talk in town moved on, to Little League games, church bake sales, and the high school's spring play. Life has a way of rolling forward, no matter how deep the scars. Ben kept mostly to himself, but he went back to work, started running again in the evenings, even joined me for supper a few nights, quietly, no big talk, but just being together. One night, as we sat on my porch, Ben turned to me and asked, "Do you think she ever loved me at all?" I considered my answer. "Maybe in her way. But her way wasn't right for you. You deserve a partner, not a project manager. Someone who wants you, not what you can give them." He chuckled at that, a real laugh this time. "You always have a way of putting things in perspective." Later that week, I found an envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Inside was a short note in shaky handwriting. "Mr. Dawson, I'm sorry for all the pain I caused. I got caught up in things I thought I wanted: money, a big house, the idea of the perfect life. I lost sight of what really matters. I hope you and Ben can forgive me someday. Vanessa." I stared at the words a long time. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, understanding was. I tucked the note into my drawer and poured myself another coffee. Sometimes the best you can do is move forward, one step, one day, one sunrise at a time. Spring deepened in Maple Grove, and little by little, the world put itself back together. Ben came over for Sunday dinner again, and this time, he brought his childhood dog, Max. We grilled burgers out back, told old stories, and laughed at things that had nothing to do with heartbreak or scandal. As dusk fell, Ben stood at the fence and looked out over the yard where he'd played as a boy. "Grandpa," he said, "do you ever regret anything?" I thought about that for a moment, then smiled. "Maybe a few things. But never protecting the ones I love. Never that." He nodded. the sadness finally starting to lift from his eyes. Me too. The storm had passed. The wounds were healing. And in the golden light of evening, I knew that our family, changed, but unbroken, would carry on. You learn a lot about people after a storm. The ones who call. The ones who quietly leave a pie on your porch. And the ones who turn the other way and pretend nothing happened. But most of all, you learn about yourself, what you're made of, how deep your roots go. For Ben, those first few weeks after the wedding that wasn't were the hardest of his life. But each sunrise brought a little more peace, and every sunset let him lay down just a bit more of that old ache. One Saturday morning, Ben surprised me by showing up with a cup of coffee, black, just how I liked it, and a newspaper under his arm. "Grandpa," he said, "let's take a drive." So we did. Out past the town limits, into the rolling farmland where my own father once taught me to fish. The air smelled like clover and fresh turned earth. We didn't talk about Vanessa, or about broken dreams. We talked about the cubs, the weather, the way the county roads always seemed to twist more every spring. It was just life, moving on, and I could see in Ben's posture, in the way he smiled, that something was shifting for the better. A week later, I noticed Ben talking more with friends again, even meeting a few new faces at the diner. He'd started volunteering at the animal shelter, something he'd always loved but hadn't made time for in years. One afternoon he dropped by my house, dog hair all over his shirt, laughing for the first time in a long while. "You know, Grandpa, I think old Max and I might adopt a new pup. Give him someone to play with." "That's the spirit," I said, grinning. "Sometimes a new friend is just what you need." But just as life seemed to settle into a gentle rhythm, another ripple disturbed the pond. I got a call late one evening from an old neighbor, Mrs. Taylor. Her voice was shaky. "Joe, I hate to bother you, but well, have you talked to your cousin Ruth lately?" I hadn't. Ruth and I had grown up together in the next town over, but time and distance had stretched our bond thin. Mrs. Taylor hesitated, then said, "She's been having some trouble, Joe." "Family trouble?" "She asked about you. Maybe you could reach out." That night I sat at my kitchen table with the phone in my hand, wrestling with old guilt. Ruth and I had drifted apart after an argument over some inheritance nonsense a decade ago. It seemed so silly now, after everything Ben and I had just lived through. I dialed her number, half expecting her not to answer. But she did, her voice tired but hopeful. "Joe? Is that really you?" We talked for nearly an hour, about her son, Danny, getting mixed up in trouble back in Chicago, about her health, about regrets. I listened, offering what comfort I could. "You're still family, Ruth. That's never going to change," she sighed. "I wish I'd remembered that sooner." The next day, Ben noticed I was a little quieter than usual. At dinner, he asked, "Everything okay, Grandpa?" I told him about Ruth, about mistakes and second chances. He listened, nodding. "Sounds like she needs you, Grandpa. Just like I did." His words stuck with me. I thought about how close I'd come to losing Ben to someone who didn't value family, and how important it was to keep those connections alive, no matter how frayed they'd become. So that weekend, Ben and I drove over to Ruth's house. She greeted us on the porch, tears shining in her eyes. For the first time in years, we sat together as a family, old wounds acknowledged, but not allowed to fester. Ben even offered to help Danny find a job at the animal shelter, and Ruth promised to visit Maple Grove more often. Afterward, as we drove home, Ben glanced at me with a small smile. "You know, Grandpa, maybe family isn't about always getting it right. Maybe it's about always coming back." I squeezed his shoulder. "That's the truest thing I've heard in a long while, son." As spring rolled into summer, I watched my grandson rebuild his life, brick by brick, day by day. He'd learned the hard way that not everyone who says, "I love you," means it. But he also learned something even more important, that real love, the kind that endures storms, forgives mistakes, and shows up even when it hurts, is what makes a house into a home. And in my heart, I knew Mary would be proud. But there was still one more chapter ahead, a final test of our family's strength, and a chance to prove, once and for all, that the ties that bind us are stronger than any storm. By July, the days in Maple Grove were long and bright, but a storm was brewing I could feel in my bones. It was Danny, Ruth's boy, who brought it to our doorstep. One Tuesday evening, just as the sun dipped behind the grain silos, I heard a car rattle up my drive. Ben and I were finishing supper, fried chicken, sweet corn, nothing fancy. The screen door banged and in stepped Danny, looking worn and jittery, his city jacket a stark contrast against my old floral wallpaper. "Uncle Joe," he blurted, "I'm in trouble." He was still young, early 20s, full of big city dreams, but I could see the fear written clear on his face. Ben greeted him, offered a cold soda. Danny took it, hands shaking. "I didn't know where else to go." He told us everything: a loan shark in Chicago, money he couldn't pay back, threats made against his mother. He tried to outrun his problems, but trouble travels fast. Ruth, proud as ever, hadn't told us the worst of it, but Danny's story filled in the blanks. For a minute, nobody spoke. Ben was the first to break the silence. "We'll figure something out, Danny. Family sticks together." Those words lit something in Danny's eyes, hope, maybe, or just relief. I pulled my chair closer. "You made a mess, son. But you did one thing right, you came home. Now, let's make a plan." I reached out to my old friend Frank Howard, the town's sheriff. He'd helped me through more than one crisis. Frank arrived that night, listened to Danny's story, and nodded. "Son, you're not the first to make mistakes, but you can't keep running. I'll make some calls, see if we can get you some legal advice. But you've got to be honest, no more secrets." While Frank made calls from the porch, I talked quietly with Ben. "This is what family means," I said. "Standing in the gap for each other. Even when it's hard." Ben nodded, eyes thoughtful. "I learned that from you, Grandpa." Later, when the house was quiet, Danny approached me. "Why are you helping me? I barely know you, and I brought nothing but trouble." I looked him in the eye, steady as ever. "Because you're Ruth's boy, and Ruth is family. That makes you family too. Around here, we don't turn our backs when things get rough." Danny swallowed hard. "I want to make things right, Uncle Joe. I really do." The next morning, we all sat around the table, forming a plan. Danny would turn himself in, face his debts and the law with the support of family at his side. Ruth came over, her face etched with worry, but grateful, and together we promised Danny he wouldn't walk alone. Frank kept his word, finding a lawyer to take Danny's case for a reduced fee. The animal shelter even offered Danny a part-time job, helping him stay busy while sorting out the mess. But not everyone in town was quick to forgive. At the diner, I overheard folks whispering, old Mrs. Kincaid warning her friends about those city boys bringing trouble. For a moment, I felt the old sting of pride. My family, the subject of gossip again. Ben saw it too. One evening, as we walked home from the shelter, he said, "You ever get tired of being the one who has to forgive, Grandpa? Sometimes I just want to shut everyone out." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Forgiveness isn't about letting folks walk all over you. It's about choosing who you want to be, no matter what they do." He thought about that a long moment. "Even after what happened with Vanessa? With everything?" "Especially after that," I replied. "Every storm leaves a little bitterness behind. But if you let it take root, pretty soon you forget what kindness feels like." Slowly, Ben understood. He stopped worrying about the whispers and started focusing on the work, helping Danny, rebuilding trust with Ruth, fixing the small things around my place that always seemed to break just when you needed them least. Danny's court date came and went. He pled guilty to some charges, but because he turned himself in, the judge was merciful. He'd pay restitution, serve some community service, but he got to stay with us, got a real chance to start over. That night, our family sat together on the porch, me, Ben, Ruth, Danny, even old Max snoring at our feet. The fireflies blinked in the dark, and I realized we'd survived another storm, not because we were perfect, but because we'd chosen to hold tight to each other. As Ben poured lemonade for us all, he raised his glass. "To family," he said, voice full and steady. "The ones you're born with, and the ones you find along the way." And in the quiet warmth of that summer night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long while: peace, and the knowledge that, come what may, we would face it together. But as life would have it, there was one more surprise waiting for us, just around the corner. Summer in Maple Grove drew to a close with the kind of golden evenings that make you forget winter ever existed. The town was finally settling down, the gossip had faded, and our house on Sycamore Lane felt like a true home again. Ruth had decided to stay a while longer, her laughter brightening the kitchen, her help in the garden keeping me on my toes. Danny, for all his stumbles, was steadying himself, a little more confident with each passing day. Ben surprised us all. About a month after Danny's court date, he brought home a young woman named Emily. She was quiet at first, with a smile that reminded me of wildflowers in spring. Emily worked at the local library, loved animals, and had a patience about her that could weather any storm. They didn't rush things. Ben took it slow this time. No whirlwind romance, no quick proposals. Just long walks in the park, Sunday dinners with the family, and quiet moments reading on the porch. Watching them together, I saw a different kind of happiness in Ben, a sturdy, lasting happiness built not on excitement, but on trust and gentle care. One crisp Sunday afternoon, as we all sat outside with lemonade and pie, Emily helped Ruth with her knitting while Danny tossed a ball for Max. Ben sat next to me, watching the scene with quiet satisfaction. "I never thought I'd have this again, Grandpa," he said. "After Vanessa, after everything, I figured I'd miss my chance." I patted his hand. "Second chances are what life's all about, Ben. The trick is recognizing them when they come." He nodded, thoughtful. "How did you and Grandma know you'd make it through? All those years, all those storms?" I smiled, thinking of Mary, her hands in the flour, her laughter at my terrible jokes. "We didn't always know, son. But we made a promise to stick together no matter what. We chose each other again and again. That's what love really is." Emily smiled at Ben across the table, her eyes warm. In that moment, I saw the future stretching out, uncertain, sure, but hopeful. New love, old roots, and a family stronger for all it had endured. That autumn, Ben and Emily helped Ruth move into a small apartment nearby. Danny kept his job at the shelter, and for the first time in years, I heard him talk about night classes at the community college. I helped him with his homework some evenings, and he helped me fix the squeaky porch steps that had driven Mary crazy for decades. Our little family, pieced together by fate and choice, had learned to weather the hard times. We still had scars, but they were reminders of what we'd survived. One evening, as the leaves turned red and gold, we gathered for a simple meal. Ruth said grace, her voice steady and full of gratitude. Afterward, Ben stood up, clearing his throat. "I just want to thank you, Grandpa. For everything, for not giving up on me, for teaching me what matters most." I looked around at the faces I loved. "That's what grandpas are for, Ben. To remind you that home isn't a place, but the people who stand by you, no matter how tough it gets." As the sun set over Maple Grove, I felt Mary's presence in the gentle wind and the quiet laughter of my family. I knew she'd be proud, not because we were perfect, but because we'd kept our promises, held each other up, and found hope on the other side of the storm. And as I watched Ben walk hand in hand with Emily down the garden path, I realized that every ending is really just a new beginning. Our family story, like all the best ones, wasn't about having it easy. It was about holding on, letting go, and starting again. And that, I reckon, is the truest meaning of home.